go. That's better. Oh. We were waiting. Hello, everybody. How are you? Hope you well. We were waiting for a meat package from Butcher Box, and it said it was delivered and everything like that. And it was an alert came on the back camera, on the back door. I'm like, I looked. There was a truck. I'm like, what the heck was that there? My brother just happened to look around, and they put it behind the fence, but the wrong property. It was put in the behind the garage that's on the other property that the house is not there. I'm like, okay. And I sat here all day just having the camera on, watching it. Only if I had both cameras on my phone, maybe I would have seen it come along. We'll wait another minute for people, just in case. Okay. The devil's oh. Oh, there's a swear word in here. Let's see what chapter this was from. Oh. Mm-hmm. Okay. I will get the chat out. Since I know the delivery came, I don't have to watch the security camera. I am going to put together some songs to sing because tomorrow is 4th of July. I'm going to do some patriotic songs. I was about to say, why did someone hit like and leave? That's me. He's going to make macaroni salad. My brother is, and one time I says, Mom, do you want my macaroni salad? Yeah, we have leftover chicken. Okay. Okay, now you can shred it. Remember, no skin this time. So she didn't get everything off of the bones, just the good chunks of meat, and the rest she ate off the bones. And she shredded it up, and then I said, no, it's almost like dicing it. Then she cut it more. So I went, that's perfect. So it was a lot of macaroni salad. We had this big bowl. Nothing. A car goes by, the motion detection goes on. I'm like, so I put some chicken salad in, mixed it with all the vegetables, and I always put frozen peas in there when they're still frozen, and I mix it all with celery, peppers, you name it, I mix it in. But this family don't like all that stuff. So, but I can always put more stuff in my plate. Or you can do tuna, you can do ham. Heck, you can do eggs. But the thing is, you can put so much stuff in it that you don't need to eat anything else. I ate this pasta salad this woman made for me and handed it to me in front of my boss. So there, that's your lunch for a break. I already had my break. I'm out in 10 minutes. She goes, well, you can eat on the way home because I was coming here. So do you want the container back? She says, no, just toss it. This is one of those cheap ones. And so I ate it on the bus. Oh my gosh. And that's one of the first times, no, second times I had avocados. They were diced up really tiny. She told me there was a note in the bag of what was in it. Okay, let's get started. Even mushrooms, but it was diced up. I mean, yeah, I'll eat it anyway. Not bad. But they were really, I'd rather eat mushrooms raw than cooked. But I'd rather not eat them at all. Yeah. Um, okay. For you, if you're just joining me now for the first time, this is chapter 5. I read the forward and chapters 1 through 4 through a couple live streams. So I could be reading 2 or 3 chapters. It really depends. Because this is one of my favorite books. And I might be reading other books on here. So if I get used to reading, maybe I can look for books. So, okay. A Prairie Tale by Melissa Gilbert, Chapter 5, Little House. In the late 80s, a friend of mine, Dean Cameron, was shooting a movie called Summer School. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. On the Paramount lot that were shooting a classroom scene, and between takes, he rummaged through the papers the prop guys had stuffed into the school desk and pulled out a paper that now hangs framed in my study. It was the call sheet for my original Little House screen test. I don't recall the first day we began shooting the series or anyone talking to me about the impact doing a series would have on my life, especially if the ratings equaled or best the TV movie. Bested? I didn't think that was a word. Which would mean being on a hit series, which it was a hit series, which is an altogether different experience than just being on TV. At this stage in my life, Little House on the Prairie is simply part of my cellular 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 makeup. Sorry, I can't pronounce nothing. I remember life before getting the movie, and then the next thing I knew, I was Trey, Trap. What is that word? Why can't I freaking read? Well, let's look up these words as I'm having trouble with it. There's no one else in the chat to help, so, which is fine. Whoa, I forgot a letter. P SING. So I'm searching. No, not 2 S's. Alright. How do you pronounce it? I'm gonna look it up. Traits. traipsing, to walk or go aimlessly or idly or without finding. All right, so it's all right. I got it. That's how you learn to pronounce words and stuff. You look it up right away. Okay, let's start all over that one. I remember life before getting the movie, and then the next thing I knew, I was traipsing into Allison. I always pronounce her name wrong. Arngrim's trailer to give her the lowdown on the cast and crew. Allison joined us on the second episode, which was titled Country Girls. She played nasty Nellie Olson and began referring to Laura and Mary as country girls. Almost as soon as we met her in school, my brother Jonathan played her younger brother Willie. Though she was my great rival on the show, Allison and I became instant friends from the moment I confided. There's only one mean person on the show. Everyone else is great. At lunch, we constantly tried to gross each other out by mixing together the most disgusting combinations of food and eating them. One of my more memorable creations was butterscotch pudding and radishes. Ew! It wasn't half bad. Ew. It was great to have a friend on the set. We celebrated birthdays together and sleepovers and got into adventures on the lot. I can't imagine any better playground for a kid than Paramount Studios. Sprawl of sound stages, streets, and stars. We worked on stage 31 and 32, which were located at the back of the lot. Behind us, there was a cemetery. On the other side was a large wall. Not any old cemetery. It was the final resting spot of Rudolph Valentino, Jane Mansfield, Cecile B. Oh, sorry. Cecil B. DeMille, and other Hollywood luminaries. I thought being close to there and so many other grave sites was neat in a creepy way. And I tried on upteen times to get a peek by climbing up the fence. I could see her doing that. I never made it, and I wouldn't have even if I could have pulled myself up. Coiled barbed wire was strung along the top of the fence, preventing any break-ins or breakouts. I would arrive at work early in the morning as the sun was starting its slow climb, and it would be dark on the sound stages. One held the interior and exterior of the little house, and the inside and outside of the barn. The other held the interior of Olson's Mercantile, the church, school, and Dr. Baker's office. And it would be dark on the stage except for wherever we were shooting first. White light bathed that corner of the little house world and made it appear as if touched by divine power. Our dressing rooms were small mobile homes parked in an alley in back of the stages. I went to school in a little dressing room that looked like a house on wheels, which was located outside the soundstage. My teacher on the set was Mrs. Helen Minier, I think. Yeah. Or Minier. She would instruct me in all subjects from fourth grade to my last year of high school. At some point, I would find my call sheet and look for my name, which was always third down from the top, following Mike and Karen's. It was a small affirmation that I was really there, really a part of this dream-like experience that felt like the greatest game of dress-up ever. Whenever possible, I like to wander into the writer's office and try to get the scoop on what they were planning for future scripts and who was coming on the show next. I wanted to know everything ahead of time. They called me precocious. But I could just as easily have been called nosy or annoying. Hi, whoever's here. It says 2 people. Oh, not no more. I explored the lot whenever I was able to get away, which wasn't often. I was unable to resist the lure of checking out the places where scenery was stored, the other sound stages, and the commissary. Commissary, supermarket. The commissary, which was a hub of activity and stargazing. Everybody on the lot working on TV shows or movies broke for lunch at approximately the same time and headed for the commissary, where my eyes darted across the large dining room, oblivious to my own profile as one of the stars on a hit show. I was always looking around. I got excited whenever I saw someone famous like Mark and Mindy stars Robin Williams and Pam Dower. Or the guys from Happy Days. Oh, yes. She was so lucky to see them. I used to meet up in line with Henry Winkler. Oh, one of the loveliest people in the business, as they'd say in Prairie speak. He and I took a shine to each other. We'd act out what we were having for lunch. What are you having today? He asked. I'm having a hamburger, I said. Then I want to see you act a hamburger, he said with a note of challenge in his voice. Oh, what? How can you act out a hamburger? Oh, anyway, so I acted like a hamburger. I have to say, the first time he suggested that game, I thought he was nuts. But lunch with the Fonz got to be something I looked forward to. It wasn't just a meal, it was a performance. He made me think as I ordered, how would I act a salad? What would I do to portray a grilled cheese? One day he cut in line behind me and I was taking my food. How are the french fries? He asked. I turned toward him. The fries are very French today. What? I said in a thick accent. The frown I wore while making the 4th episode was extremely unusual, but easily understood. I was unhappy. I wasn't in more of the episode. I was already starting to like work more than home. A week later, my smile was back and as bright as my mood. We were shooting the episode Mr. Edward's Homecoming. Oh, I love that one. I can tell you everything in that. I had a scene at the end in which Dr. Baker softened the news I had to have my tonsils out by giving me a gigantic gun job. That's not what they gave her. This black licorice thing. But anyway. Wait, what? Where was I? Since I wasn't allowed any sugar at home, getting a piece of candy was like being handed an Oscar, and I savored every bite of that magnificent candy. We did 5 or 6 takes, and I got a new gumdrop each time. Those were momentous occasions for me. I felt naughty as my mother watched disapprovingly, but what could she say? Eating the candy was part of my job. Even sweeter, Victor French returned to the series in that episode. It hadn't been that long since I bid him a tearful goodbye, both on and off camera during the pilot. But at the time, I didn't think I'd ever see him again. So I was beyond excited to have him back. I didn't have to act in a scene where we were brought together again. I was genuinely happy. Whoa, I'm getting emotional. I remember that. I was playing the episode in my head. Oh, I never thought I'll see you again. And then never mind, I'm not gonna say nothing else because I might spoil something. I had no idea what I was go. I had no idea what. No, I had no idea what I was doing in the episode called "The Love of Johnny Johnson." Oh boy, which had Laura falling for a boy who liked Mary. Till that time, I'd never expressed such feelings for a boy, but I'd seen the girls on the Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch get their first crushes. So I mimicked them, but not all the acting was pretended. The unseen rivalry between Mary and Laura in that episode play off of the competitive. Okay, sorry guys, but this is probably why nobody watches this. I think I might know what it is. Let's see what it says. Compete. Compet. Compet. Competitiveness. Competitive. Competition. I'll say that exists off camera between Melissa, Sue Innocent, and me. When we snapped at each other, it was fairly real. The lines also blurred between Mike and me. Our special bond began on the plot when we repeated the scene that I'd read in my edition, the one after we lost the dog while crossing the river, and Laura apologizes to him for thinking he didn't care about Jack being lost. It was a sweet father-daughter moment, one that was very real to me. It wasn't a stretch at all to think of Mike as my dad. I could easily imagine having such a conversation with him. At the end of The Love of Johnny Johnson, Laura cried out her broken heart to her father. One of those scenes that dealt perfectly with the necessary cleansing pain of growing up. It was just one of the many times I would cry on the show. I think I cried for some reason in every show. Sometimes it was hard for me to get to those moments, and this episode was one of those times. Putting myself in Laura's shoes didn't work, nor did dragging up some kind of horrible memory from the dungeon. Dungeon? So Mike helped me. Oh, yeah. Oh. I get emotional just thinking about it. I'm sorry. He put his arm around me and walked us away from the set, off to the side where we could be alone. And in that the time it took to walk 15 or 20 feet, he got himself crying, then turned to me with tears rolling down his face. He said, "Do you have any idea how much I love you?" Whew. Then did I. Then did it. I mean, that did it. Oh, whew. My heart swelled with similar feelings, and a moment later, tears poured from my eyes. Mike let me cry for a few seconds, and then he said, "Are you ready?" I nodded, and we shot our scene. Mike employed that technique for many of the lovely father-daughter scene that followed. Looking back, yes, it was a bizarre manipulation, a kind of twisted way to get a kid to perform. On the other hand, it worked, and I have no doubt that it was therapeutic. By crying, I was able to release some of my own emotions I kept bottled up. A few weeks after the Love of Johnny Johnson, we shot Town Party, Country Party, an episode memorable for the friendship I struck up with Kim Richards, who played Olga. Oh, yeah. Oh. The little girl Laura befriended after hurting her ankle. Kim was a well-known child actor who'd been on Nanny and the Professor. And while I hit it off with her, I also enjoyed her older sister Kathy, who served as her on-set guardian and was young and fun. Just 18 when she was hanging around our set. Kathy later moved to New York and married Rick Hilton. We stayed in touch, and my mom and I were the first people to find out she was pregnant with her first child, Paris Hilton. Wow. 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 I was sure the Raccoon would be my favorite episode. I think it's of the first season, since I was able to play with a real live baby raccoon between takes. That was pretty cool. The little critter played the role of the bad guy in the story. Laura battled for her life after getting bit by a raccoon, forced to be feared to be rabid. I played that part to the hilt, revealing in the attention I received from playing Laura sick in bed. As it turned out, the Lord is my shepherd. Oh yeah. A two-parter we shot a few weeks later became my favorite of the first year and still stands out as my favorite among the more than 200 episodes we made over nearly 10 full seasons. On screen, this ultimate tearjerker was all about Laura's relationship with her father. But the lines we said about love and devotion applied off camera too. After that episode, there was no questions about the special bond between Mike and me. And now more than ever, I cherish the opportunity he gave me to say such things to him. Plus, we had a real newborn baby on the show. I played with it between takes. That was even better than playing with the baby raccoon. Yeah. Baby news wasn't confined to the show. Early in 1974, while Little House was in the midst of production, oh yeah, my mother announced she was pregnant. our house filled with excitement, and I was the head cheerleader. No one could have been more thrilled. I was big into baby dolls and carrying at least one from my plastic headed brood around at all times, as well as diapers, bottles, and changing of outfits, and sometimes even a stroller. I was beyond happy at the prospect of a real baby in the house. Except for 3 o'clock in the morning. Almost simultaneously, Auntie Lynn revealed she also had a little bun in the oven. I remember it as a good, exciting time, though not everyone shared such an enthusiasm. One night, Harold's kids were over for dinner, and we sat around the dining room table talking about the baby. One by one, we tossed out po- prospective names from our various suggestions. It was apparent I was overjoyed about the forthcoming addition to our family, and my brother Jonathan, not so much. Joey was too young to care. Finally, we turned to Patrice and asked what she thought. She scrunched up her face and said, I think we should just call it garbage. Wow. Whoa. Even more amazingly, uh, Even more amazing than Tree's comment was the rest of the family's reaction to it. My mom and Harold sort of laughed it off, and then we all just continued having dinner like nothing had happened. Now, I'm just going to stop there. If anybody's watching this and you have to tell your kids that you're pregnant and stuff and they act like that, you're going to make them, you should make it sound like they have a very important part of this baby's life. Like, for instance, let them see if they can pick out some good names, and then you can put them in little pieces of paper, put it in the hat, and then they can draw out 2 names for the first and middle name. My friend was let to do that. She picked her sister's 3 names, and then she had to put them in this good order where it clicked in her head. The next few months were extremely busy. They included the end of the first season and the dreaded goodbyes to everyone on the crew. A return to regular classes at school, and in preparation for the baby, a move to a roomier house in Encino. Encino, yeah. Previously owned by actor Victor Clagley? Sorry. McLadden. No, McLaglen. McLaglen. Yeah. Our new house had 5 bedrooms, a guest house, and a pool. My mother redecorated beautifully. The more inadvertently uncovered one of my biggest secrets. Uh-oh. My mother didn't permit candy, cookies, or any else with sugar in the house. No Twinkies, none of the good stuff I found in my friend Colette's house. She lived up the street, and I'd go up to her house, grab a handful of candy, and sneak it back home, then to my bedroom. I'd eat the candy and then toss the wrappers on top of my canopy bed, the only place I knew my mom wouldn't find them. That is until the movers disassembled my bed. Uh-oh. I came home from camp one day. My mother was waiting for me. Before she uttered a word, I noticed her clenching jaw and fiery eyes, and I knew I was in trouble. I have something I want to talk to you about, she said. I tried to think what I could have done to piss her off as she led me into my room. Then I stopped in the doorway aghast at what I saw in front of me. The movers had taken my bed apart. It was in pieces on the floor, including the gorgeous canopy. And on top of it were several years' worth of candy wrappers. Oh my God. I took the fifth when my mom asked for an explanation. What was there to say? My crime was evident. I'd eaten candy in violation of the household rules and I lied about it. I was grounded. But that was soon rendered insignificant by more serious. Oh, what was the other word? Sorry. More serious and dire turn of events involving my father. One day after the move, my mother sat Jonathan and me down, and in a shaky voice she said, "Daddy is sick." It turned out my father had been on a cruise ship where he was doing his stand-up and suffered a stroke. Oh boy. She said he had been airlifted from the ship to a hospital where he was recuperating. "He's dying to talk to you," she said. Of course, I never heard her saying the words talk to you. To talk to you. All I heard was he's dying. And I immediately fell apart. My mother quickly put me on the phone with him, and hear my dad assure me that he wasn't about to die was probably the only thing that could have pulled me from utter panic and hysteria. Though my father spent most of his time on the road, I knew he was proud of my work in Little House. He told me all the time, and I saw even more of him after his stroke, frequently spending weekends at his house. Early on, he was partially paralyzed on one side, and he had one of those metal triangle things hanging over his bed, a lift, that he could use to help pull himself up. A couple times I hooked my leg onto it and swung down upside down. He thought it was funny. My dad's girlfriend Natalie was not amused when I showed her. My father's Lancy on those weekend sleepovers accounted for some of my fondest memories. As he got stronger, he stayed up late, really late, past 10 o'clock at my rate, which was the middle of the night to me, and watched my favorite horror movies on Creature, Feature, and Chiller Theater during commercials. We'll pile into the kitchen and make ridiculous, thick, hard Italian salami sandwiches. Oh yeah. Laden with spicy mustard and carry them along with the frosty root beer float. Oh yeah. Into bed where we finished watching the movie. To this day, one of my favorite things to do is watch a scary movie with my boys while we eat salami sandwiches. He seemed to have made a full recovery by the end of the summer. When I returned to the second season of Little House, the relief I felt for witnessing his rebirth as he went back on the road was matched by my nearly out of control anticipation as my mom's expectant tummy got bigger, and she sat further from the table As naive as I was about the birds and the bees, at that point, all my knowledge of where babies came from and how they were born was gleaned from the Lord is my shepherd episode. I still knew she was about to pop. At the end of January, and already well into Little House second season, she went into labor. I was on the set when it happened. Harold called the production office to let them know, but they kept the news from me. Sorry, since there was no wait. They kept the news from me since there was no telling how long labor would take, and they wanted as much work out of me as possible. I'm still a little steamed about that. Well, I wouldn't tell her either. I wouldn't even tell her until that day of work was done. Well, by the way, your mother had the baby. Finally, later in the afternoon, someone came up to me and said, Half Pint, there's a telephone call for you. I hurried to the phone on stage. It was Harold. As soon as I heard his voice, I asked, Is it here? Yes, he said. You have a baby sister. Oh, you have a baby sister. Oh, what's her name? Sarah Rebecca. Which is Sarah Gilbert. They went with my choice for a middle name. Oh, that's awesome. Whew. I leaped into the air and let out a scream. Everyone within earshot knew of my excitement. Let me get a drink, guys. Wow. I get emotional. Whew. Is someone here? Oh, they're just listening. Hi. They're saying it's just a book. When I turned around, the cast and crew, all of whom already knew about the good news, were gathered behind me, standing in a semicircle, and they cheered wildly. A few days later, my mom brought Sarah home from the hospital, and I was beside myself. With Jonathan's arrival, I felt intruded upon. Sarah was different. She was my baby doll. Just over 9 pounds at birth. Holy cow. She was the most perfect, most gorgeous, chunky of a baby imaginable. I could barely keep my hands off her. I just stared at her and kissed her and smelled her little neck at my insistence. Sarah's bedroom was next to mine. I played with her in the morning and made a beeline for her when I got home from work. And often I got up in the middle of the night to watch her breathe. And if she was too still, I would poke her gently and make her stir. Not only was she my mother's miracle, as far as I was concerned, she was mine too. She still is. Now, here's a question for the people that's watching us. When you're reading a book, do you get emotional? Hi, Kristen. I'm reading a Prairie Tale and getting emotional. I'm... My mother encouraged me to believe that I was blessed in every way. She would tell me my life was enchanted. What with Sarah, a wonderful family, a job I adored, and as mother reminded me when I asked about my own entrance into the world, the genetic gifts of my prima ballerina and Rhodes Scholar birth parents, it was impossible to argue. Indeed, my life was full of moments of genuine happiness, laughter, and joy. My mother's whimsy rubbed off. Yeah. This book's different, you know. When I get my shelves put up, whenever he makes them. No hurry. I'm gonna put this Little House DVD set I have, the pilot episode in this book. I'm gonna put it on there. Alright. She would tell me my life was enchanted. What with Sarah, a wonderful family, a job I adored, and a mother reminded me when I asked about my own my own entrance into the world, the genetics gifts of my prima ballerina and Rhodes Scholar birth parents. It was impossible to argue. Indeed, my life was full of moments of genuine happiness, laughter, and joy. My mother's whimsy rubbed off. Sorry, I already read that. But there were troubling currents beneath the surface, complex emotions I would wrestle with later. I didn't know any better, but why were difficulties and heartaches denied, glossed over, shoved aside, or covered up? And why was I so determined to prove to my mother that I was perfect? I made sure things were exactly as she wanted them, happy and sparkly. I would have been nuts or spoiled brat to complain about anything in my life at that time, so I didn't complain. With the growing awareness of my notoriety, I moved gradually into adolescence, taking baby steps and feeling uncertain whether the coming events, whether they would be good or bad. My mother didn't permit me to think in terms of gray areas as much as life is. No, it was one extreme or the other, good or bad, and with my mom, it was all good. Maybe I sense otherwise, and maybe that's why when I close my eyes and picture myself back then, I see my nose piercing against the window, looking for the comfort and security I left in the old house. I'm taking a slight break. Oh, I cried when they announced about Sarah Gilbert's birth. Yeah, in the middle of the book, there's pictures and stuff like that. Sorry. Okay. Love, loss, and love. I need to? Need to what? Oh, yeah, I remember those times. Chapter 6. 48 minutes for just 49 minutes for just one chapter? How many pages was chapter 5? Same as all the others. Okay, let me get you on. I'll take a break. Yeah, it's only one chapter. Okay, chapter 6, Growing Pains. I had to be forgiven when it came to Hollywood stars. Unless it was Batman, Chuck Norris, one of the Bradys, or David or Sean Cassidy. I was a bit oblivious to who was who. And that's why the name Patricia Neal didn't register with me when she grazed the little house set a third of the way through the second season. Oh yeah. Patricia guest starred on the two-part episode Remember Me. Played a widow with a terminal illness. I wasn't aware she had won a Best Actress Oscar for the 1963 movie HUD. Received another nomination 5 years later and appeared in such memorable films as The Fountainhead, A Face in the Crowd, and Breakfast at Tiffany's. If someone told me, and someone probably did, the information didn't stick. However, I knew she was important because all of the adults on the show were beside themselves that she was there, and because she had her own Winnebago, which was unheard of on our show. I found out Mike had arranged the Winnebago for Patricia because she'd suffered a stroke a few years earlier and needed a private, comfortable place to rest. The crew also set up a teleprompter on the set for her dialogue. Though she had recovered, I learned her stroke had been much worse than my father's. We kids were told not to distract her, to be respectful and keep our distance. That just made tensions me for intrigued. What? Tennis. Whatever. Early on the first day, Patricia was on set. She and I had a fun exchange, and she took me under her wing. I was allowed to go in her Winnebago and spent a lot of time with her. She made me feel comfortable, and as we chatted, she opened the door for me to ask her anything. So, being kind of gilliness, I asked her why she needed a teleprompter and how come she couldn't remember her lines. She explained what had happened to her and more specifically what had happened to her brain. It's difficult for me because I only recently learned to walk again, she said. I still have to think right, left, right, left. And when my brain is busy thinking right, left, right, it forgets everything else. She gave me a lovely doll as a wrap gift. But more than the doll, she gave me information and stuff to think about. In fact, I remember being profoundly moved and almost a little confused by her openness. We didn't discuss anything that openly at my house. My father's stroke wasn't mentioned. It had been bad, but he'd recovered. And now that he was back on the road, he didn't have to think about it. Hello there, Danielle. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, we weren't supposed to. But I still worried and wondered, and those thoughts rattled around my head until I spoke to Patricia. She told me more about having a stroke than anyone else did, including my own father. She let me see it was possible to recover, which enabled me to a sense of exhale. I didn't have to be scared all the time about my daddy. I still think about the way Patricia honestly cast a light on life. Writing it of some of my deeper ridding it some of my deeper and darkest fears. I loved her for it. I'm on I'm one of those people who believe everything, good and bad, happens for a reason. You're always in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And so I believe that the universe sent Patricia into my life when I needed her. I also needed braces for my legendary buck teeth. Michael Landon once said I could eat an apple through the picket fence, and he was being kind. I could literally bite down with my teeth clenched, stick my thumb between my bottom and my top teeth. My father insisted on paying for my orthodontist even though I earned a nice paycheck. I'm pretty sure it was because my daddy was a proud man and there was no way he'd let me pay for anything. And because he was staunchly against our family falling into the traps child stardom and the money that goes along with it can bring, I never got the chance to ask him. He kept himself booked on those cruise ships and worked hard when he probably should have taken it easier. I miss my daddy. I know. I know that no one knew how much I missed him. I wouldn't dare say it out loud. Oh, okay, Danielle. As it might have hurt Harold's feelings and upset my mom. But I wished every day and prayed every night that I could spend more time with him. I do see now how lucky I was to have a wonderful daddy substitute in Mike. Our relationship continued to grow even tighter, though there were still the inevitable growing pains. For instance, one day as we shot in an emotional scene for the episode titled The Gift, I sensed his famous temper was about to blow. Uh-oh. It was my fault. I couldn't remember my lines. There was nothing I feared more than disappointing him. From the moment he me for the role, chose me for the role of Half Pint on Little House, I felt a connection to him that transcended our TV relationships and made me want to please him. Plus, his anger was terrifying, and having witnessed it, I never wanted to be on the receiving end, but I thought I might be about to experience it after he called cut for the third time and turned to me with a look that sent a shiver up my spine. Ooh. He was about to take it down a notch before leaning close to me. Uh-oh. Half pint? Do you not know your lines? He asked in a measured voice. Did you not study the scene? I lost it. Tears gushed. I stammered while searching for an explanation, but all the words jammed on my tongue. Nothing came out but an apology wail. Okay, he said. Switching gears, just calm down. Take a breath, a big deep breath. He leaned back and swiveled toward the crew. Give me a script and then everybody go for a walk. Then he went over the scene with me until I learned it. Better now, he asked. Yes, I said, good. Feeling like the storm cloud had passed, I got up and began to walk away. Suddenly, Mike grabbed my arm, spun me around, and stared daggers into my eyes. That's never happening again, is it? He said. I bite my lip trying to hold off another downpour. No, I said. Now, nearly 3.5 decades later, I can say that I've never gone into a scene on any project unprepared. Mike would have expected as much from me. He taught me not to settle for anything less than my best, especially if I demanded it of others. In the ensuing years, I've also realized his influence on my extended ways beyond the set as a kid. I didn't know he sipped vodka from his coffee mug every day almost as frequently as he pulled me into the sweat-soaked torso for a giant bear hug. But I'm sure he's one of the primary reasons why. Wait, what? Yeah. Why, as a young woman, I almost always pick men who smelled like alcohol. Likewise, I'm sure Mike was responsible for my present preference for physical men with a sense of humor. He's a perfect example. We shot exteriors on a semi-valley ranch about 90 minutes north of Paramount. And if the sun was out, Mike would, by late morning, strip off his shirt and work in just his pants and boots in suspenders. In all fairness, it could be hella costly hot in Semi Valley. HELLACIOUSLY. Well, women came out in doves to watch him work and to swoon. And he loved playing a certain prank on them. He would send me to catch a frog from the pond. I can still hear his surreptitious whisper. Half pint. Go find me a little one. Then pop whatever I brought back in his mouth. Ew! Really? Then pop whatever I brought back in his mouth, walk over to where the woman stood, say hello, and let the poor freaked out frog jump out at them. Oh my gosh. As they gasped and shrieked, he flashed a naughty, self-satisfied grin that made him even more lovable. Imagine, guys, putting a frog in your mouth. Oh my gosh. It would be years before I opened my eyes to my shortcomings. And until then, I thought he was perfect. His daughter Leslie was one of my best friends. I was also close to Mike Jr., who was a year younger than Leslie and me. I slept at their house, and they at mine, often enough that they felt like my weekend family, and I thought Mike and Lynn were the most glamorous, loving couple. As we went through the season, work seemed more like play. Various episodes required me to go fishing, fly a kite with a cute boy I kind of liked on an off-screen fellow child star, Eric Shea, who attended my school, do scenes with guest star Richard Basehart, a giant in my eyes for having starred as Admiral Nelson in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and pretended to fight with Allison, who, though cast as my on-screen nemesis, was one of my best friends in real life. When we had slumber parties at Allison's house, we got to stay up and watch Saturday Night Live. At my house, the lights went out much earlier, and my TV intake was carefully monitored for age appropriateness. My mom had a long list of rules that were impossible to explain to my friends. Among others, she didn't believe girls should wear black or get their ears pierced until they were 18. I still haven't figured that one out, though I lived by it. And when I turned 18, I did what my girl in my position would. I pierced my right ear once and my left 3 times. I had no idea how she would have reacted to my first crush, because I didn't tell her that my heart went pitter-patter whenever I thought about Craig Botkin, nor at the end of the school year did I let her see my 6th grade yearbook, where friends wrote they were sure I'd marry Craig and they'd see me at the wedding. Don't want to hear bad stuff. You aren't going to see. Okay. Okay, thank you for stopping by. But that was the least of what went unspoken. In February, I was home from school with a bad cold when my mom came in with my brother. I know what plot this is. And said she had to tell us something. The key words in that sentence were, I had to. Because my mom wouldn't have told us something if it wasn't imperative and uninventable that we know, which was, this was. Oh. Daddy died last night, she said. For a brief second, I thought I misunderstood her the way I had when she told us about his stroke. In fact, I almost ran to the phone to call him. Then it hit me. He wasn't dying to talk to me. He was actually dead. My brother was already crying when I let out a wail that sounded like the ear was coming out of me. I collapsed into uncomfortable, racking sobs. My daddy was gone. For me, everything about my father passing is still blank and mysterious. One day I had a daddy, the next day he was gone. After my mother broke the news, we didn't talk about it again. I don't remember ever going to his house again. I wasn't asked if I wanted any of his belongings. I wasn't allowed to go to his funeral, nor was my brother. I'm sure my mother thought it would be too painful for us. She wanted to shield us from the kind of sorrow, preferring our lives to be beautiful all the time. It was a long time before I found out that my father had died after suffering a second stroke. That's not true. The truth came out later on. To this day, I don't know if he was at home or some other place. All I knew, that mattered was that he was no longer alive and my life was never going to be the same again. Now, the truth came out years later, or I think she found out the truth after she put this out, that he actually died at his own hands. It was like there was a hole in my soul. No one came to sit with me. None of my friends knew. No one at work ever mentioned my father's death. No one put their arms around me, gave me a hug, or said they were sorry. I have a feeling people were told it would be too upsetting for me. Not even Leslie Landon, my best friend, knew. Many years later, we were having lunch. Now, parents ourselves, and I mentioned something about losing my dad. Leslie was shocked. All those years, we had thought my father died before she and I met. I had a hard time believing Michael never gathered his kids, who were my closest friends, and said, listen, Melissa's having a hard time. But he didn't. I assured my mother didn't want anyone to know, lest they upset me by bringing it up. A year or so after my father's death, my grandfather took Jonathan and me to the cemetery. We looked down at my father's headstone. I looked over at my grandfather, crying, and saw my father put her arm around him. I wouldn't shed a tear that day. I wasn't supposed to be sad ever. At least that's what I thought. So I just stood there. But I was very angry. I was angry that my mother wouldn't comfort her father. That she ever had a father. That he could cry and I couldn't. And I had to be a soldier as we stood over my father's grave. More times would pass, decades in fact, before I would find out the details of my father's funeral. According to my mother, hundreds of people turned out. Tony Curtis, who loved my father and tells me the most wonderful things about him whenever we cross paths, couldn't get even go into the service. He sat on a hillside outside of the Old North Church at Forest Lawn Mortuary. Years later, my mother told me that Red Buttons delivered one of the eulogies. She said the tributes were amazing, and I should always know that many people truly love my father. I, of course, had no way of knowing whether this was true or more fairy tales. I've since chosen it to be true. My father's death was handled so differently than I would handle it today as a mother myself. I made sure that my children were exposed to death and grief from very early ages. They were given the choice to come along when we had to put pets to sleep. We even had a funeral for our pet mouse. Aww. I tried to give them an understanding of loss and a sense of grief as a necessary part of life. I wanted them to realize that without such sadness and pain, there can be none of the love and happiness. And loss doesn't mean you have to give up the good stuff in your heart. It means you cherish those memories that much more and think of the tears that they fall as smiles from the past. It's as Mike said in the beautiful poem, Remember Me, which he composed for the episode featuring Patricia Neal. Remember me with smiles and laughter, for that's the way I'll remember you all. If you can only remember me with tears, then don't remember me at all. Well, since there's several people here, I'm going to continue to our third chapter. Okay? Do you guys want to hear more? Hit the like button, please. I already lost somebody. I'm going to keep on going since the 4 didn't change. Chapter 7. What the hell happened? We moved on in the same way we moved on after my parents' divorce, without acknowledgement that anything was different, or rather a tacit agreement that we believe everything would be the same, even though it wasn't. Over spring break, we began a yearly tradition of going to Hawaii with the Landons. We stayed at the Kahala Hilton, where we bumped into our families we knew, and all of us kids swam together, helped one another build sandcastles, and played epic games of kick the can, frisbee, football, and ding dong ditch. Yeah, that was fun. I was always the kid on the beach with cotton pajamas over my one-piece bathing suit and a thick slab of white zinc oxide on my nose because I burn easily and severely. In other words, I was a total dork. No. She wasn't a dork. She has fair skin. I have the whole collection of Little House. And she was on the site, the farm where they, whatever they call it. They don't call it a farm. Ranch, where they built the town and the Little House and everything. She was with Dean Butler. Oh, excuse me. Dean Butler, who played Manly. She was already burnt, and they were. It wasn't long that she was out. Her skin was like bright red. Oh, I lost somebody. Oh well. So, to save a little money, my mother cleaned out the minibar in the room I shared with Jonathan or Patrice, depending on the year, and filled the fridge with milk, cold cuts, and bread. I can still picture myself at lunchtime, sitting in the sand in my pajamas, eating a bologna sandwich with mayonnaise dripping down my hand. Meanwhile, the other kids feasted on cheeseburgers and fruit salads served on a tray brought by the hotel staff directly to their rented poolside lounges. Dinner was more of the same while the adults went out. I was not a glamorous kid. Yeah. She got to eat a lot of bologna. Right after school got out, my mom and I went to not Round Top. Hold on. Did I skip a page? Hold on, I'm just double checking. Oh, was not a glamorous kid. Okay. Right after school got out, my mom and I went to Roundup, Montana. Oh, I wonder if we were in the same place at once. No. Where I shot the movie The Christmas Coal Miner's Miracle. Wait, what? The cast included Kurt Russell, Andy Prine, and Mitch Ryan, who played my father, yet another daddy figure with whom I bonded. He was incidentally, I don't know, the one who, many years later, sucked me into the Screen Actors Guild politics. Something for which I'll never forgive him. They were a pretty wild bunch, and apparently one night something really crazy happened, because the next day everyone on the set, cast and crew including, were laughing about it. But no one would tell me, no matter how much I begged. pleaded and connived. It annoyed the heck out of me. While we shot the film, lingered in my brain afterwards as one of my life's great mysteries. 10 years later, if I'd gone on location for a movie, stuffed an attack stuffed an attack of appendicitis. Went back to work too soon and developed a horrible infection in my blood and landed me in a bed at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Every time I opened my eyes, my bed seemed to be surrounded by concerned people with red-rimmed eyes and forced smiles standing over me. Just so you know, the forced smile things doesn't work. It just makes the patient sure he or she is going to die. In the midst of this, I overheard someone say Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell were also at the hospital, found the birth of their son, Wyatt. Oh, cool. I scribbled a note to Kurt congratulating them and asking him to come up and say hi. I gave it to a nurse who got it to the hospital's PR department, and later on, Kurt came into my room. I gestured for him to sit next to my bed. He asked how I was doing. I couldn't barely talk, but I managed to tell him that I was going to be fine. I used all my strength to prop myself up and say, I have to ask you a question. Shoot, he said. What is it? I gestured for him to come closer because I was too weak to speak above a whisper. What the hell happened in Roundup, Montana when I was a kid? I had to know just in case I didn't pull through. And Kurt laughed. Kurt laughing told me the story. It turned out there was a lot of drinking and sex going on with guys playing the role of Hollywood big shots in a small rural town and going through the local girls with Alon, particularly Andy. Kurt secretly wired a van with a microphone and hid with the sound guy in the bushes outside the town's one bar one night while Andy was inside getting hammered. Kurt had also arranged for a girl to come on to his co-star. Soon the two of them walked out of the bar, got in the van, and began to fool around. At that point, Kurt had a local police unit quietly pull up behind the van. At the moment, the girl told Andy she was only 16, as Kurt had instructed her to do. Kurt cued the police, who flashed their lights. All of a sudden, Andy burst out of the van, wearing only his underwear, and took off into the snow. Though I wasn't able to eat or drink anything in my sick bed, I found the strength to laugh. I couldn't believe that story been kept from me the whole time. Not that I would have understood it. I may have wanted in on the world of grown-ups, but I was still more comfortable in the little girl moments, like the one on the first episode of the third season when guest star Johnny Cash beckoned me to where he and his wife, June, were sitting, but me on his lap, and said, I watched your show all the time and you just climbed right into my heart. Oh, I can imagine him saying that too. I saw my classmates and peers start to go through puberty and wear bras while my gingham dress hung on me as straight as it did on the hanger in my closet. Toward the end of the 12th year, I had a double hernia operation. Oof. and woke up only to be told that the 3 pubic hairs I've grown had been shaved off by the nurse. Oh, wonderful. That was how I heralded the honest herald huh? puberty by being humiliated. After I watched the movie The Great Waldo Pepper, I developed a crush on Robert Redford. He overtook Batman's Adam West as the man I wanted to marry. I went through my Tiger Beat and Teen Beat. Oh yeah, I remember those magazines and papered my school locker with photos of him. John Travolta, David Cassidy, Sean Cassidy, Park Stevenson, and How the West Was Won, Bruce Boxleiter, my future husband. Oh wow, she had a crush on him in school, and she never. Oh wow. Only in this industry can a girl grow up and marry the pitcher in the locker. I was also in those magazines. Not that I gave a shit. It says shit. I devoured the articles on those young men and believed every word, knowing full well the stuff written about me wasn't true. Unlike some girls, I wasn't boy crazy. I was too reserved for such displays, which made me quietly selective. But I felt like my life might change this first time I saw Scott Baio on Paramount Lot. My friend and fellow Chachi devotee Tracy Nelson was even more excited. The two of us went to tapings of Happy Days whenever possible. Though she'll kill me for admitting this, we rewrote the lyrics to Linda Ronstadt's song Blue Bayo to Scott Baio. Uh-oh. I started hanging around the commissary waiting for him to show up so I could say hi to him as if he might be remotely interested. He wasn't. In fact, he couldn't have been more disinterested. I had no such delusions when I heard John Travolta was shooting Grease on the lot, but I put myself on red alert for any sightings. When it finally happened, I was eating lunch with, oh yeah, Catherine McGregor, who played Mrs. Olson. Kathleen's nickname was Scotty, which I knew that, and she was hilarious. One of my favorite lunch companions for her openness and sense of humor, for her lack of inhibition made her a less than perfect choice to be seated across from me when I literally went into shock. What is it? Scotty asked, her back to whatever I'd seen that had caused such a reaction. That guy over there, I said. She turned and looked over her shoulder. Him? With the greased hair? Yeah, I said. That's Vinny Barbarino. John was wearing the soon to be infamous Danny Zuko jeans and leather jacket. He was gorgeous. As he walked toward the food counter, Scotty twisted around in her chair, leaned back, and signaled him over to our table with an wave, intimidated wave that could have guided a 747 to the gate. Even as I pleaded, no, 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 please don't do it. Just in case he didn't see her, she'd augmented her effort with a piercing wobble. Oh, young man, over here. Yes, Mrs. Olson. No. If you watch Little House, you can imagine how she sounded. Yes, just like Harry Olsen. Young man! No. Oh my god. Just like Harry Olsen calling out to some young man in town. Oi. I wanted to die. I literally slipped under the table. It wasn't like he wouldn't know who I was. I was on a highly rated TV program, and I was in my little house wardrobe. John came right over. He was warm and gracious, and I crawled out from underneath the table, and I was grateful he didn't laugh at me. Still, after he went to get his food, I turned to Scotty and said, "Please don't ever do that to me again." Oh, that's so funny. A few years later, Tracy and I had the Grease album, and we stage it and sing along like devoted cult members. More often than not, I let Tracy play Sandy. Our performances also included Holly Robinson, an amazing singer, who I befriended that summer when my mother and Harold began a short-lived tradition of renting a house in the Malibu colony. Joined by the Landons, I remembered us girls, Leslie, Holly, Tracy, and me, decamped on the beach when we weren't singing, eyeing the chiseled bodies of surfers, studying the older surfer girls in their bikinis, and sharing whatever shreds of information we knew or thought we knew about womanhood. Leslie reported that she'd found a book on her parents' shelf that said yellow was the color to wear if you wanted to seduce a man. Yellow? I asked. They find it sexy, she said. Crap. I sighed. That's the one color that doesn't work on me. It wasn't like I was ready to seduce anyone. I didn't know the first thing about sex, not what it was or how it worked. My mother never explained the facts of life. At 10, I'd found a box of tampons under the sink in her bathroom, and when I asked what they were for, she said they were for applying makeup. What? But now I was 14. The miss other person inside my brain periodically clamored for details about how the different parts worked, not just genitalities. Oh, whatever. GENERALITIS. I'll even show you this word. Okay. One day I was in the car with my mom when my need to know wrestled my usual, I'm sorry, reticence into submission. Flushed and overheated by the breakthrough I was about to make. I asked her what it was like to get Sarah. She went into the whole story about giving birth to my sister, but that wasn't what I wanted to know, and I asked the question again. What was it like to get Sarah? My mother's expression revealed her suddenly understanding of my question. I could almost see her brain go, "Oh shit, here it comes." It was very lovely, she said. Aww. And that was all she offered. As she turned her eyes back on the road, she left me with my mouth agape with disappointment. confusion, and questions. What did lovely mean? And more important, could it still be lovely for me even if yellow wasn't my color? I don't know when Melissa Sue got her period or began thinking about these same issues, but there was a certain point during the fourth season when all of a sudden she had really long fingernails. I bite mine red all the time. Wore makeup, smoked cigarettes, and guzzled tab. She was way beyond my league. Whoa! Melissa Sue Anderson smoked cigarettes? Ugh. Then when she began dating actor Lance Kerwin of James at 15 fame, forget it. She wasn't just out of my league. She was in a different universe. It was like all of a sudden she was grown up. After that, she dated Frank Sinatra Jr., but we never talked about any of that stuff. Allison was my great source of information. She made sure I noticed her boobs on the day they popped out. And a short time later, she came to work and whispered to me, "Guess what?" "What?" I asked. "I have a pillow between my legs." "What? What?" I asked in a complete ignorance. "Is it like some contest to see if you can walk that way?" Allison looked at me dumbstruck. "Hello? I have a pillow between my legs." I shrugged the apology. "I'm sorry? I don't know what that means," I admitted. She shook her head, mystified at my ignorance. "I got my period," she said. "I had to use a maxi pad." Oh. In my defense, I knew what it meant to get your period. I just never heard of a maxi pad. Luckily, Allison had provided a demo on tampon using a glass of water, giving a lesson on hygiene, and demystified everything else by the time I got my period for the first time at 15. 15? Lucky her. If she hadn't, imagine how surprised I would be when I told my mom that I got my period and she hadn't handed me a box full of things she said were for putting on makeup. I dealt with the confusion of those hormone fueled changes, but hearing my girlfriends begin to giggle, report about their make-out sessions with boys sent me into a near catastrophic panic that no one was ever going to want to date me. Forget, forget the glam life of the young Hollywood star portrayed in Teen Magazine. What turns Melissa on? How can you be her friend? Win a date with Melissa. I spent my evenings lying on my bedroom floor, listening through my headphones to Ian's Janice Ann's terribly sad song at 17. I played that song over and over again, crying as I sang the lyrics to myself, thinking they had been writing specially for me. They had been written specially for me. "Oh, honey, you weren't pathetic," my husband said after I described that scene to him. "Everybody loved you." "Yeah," I said. "Everybody but me." I was melodramatic. I feared my grandfather's hugs and kisses on the weekends would be the only attention I'd get from a man. I envisioned spending my life alone, playing solitaire. No, it was worse than that. I pictured myself alone, particularly cheating at solitaire. Little did I know there was one guy who had his eye on me. In all likelihood, he had had his eye on numerous other girls too, but one day I went to CBS to tape a guest appearance on the dinosaur show, and 14-year-old Rob Lowe made a point of standing in the hallway so he could meet me, with the script under his arm so I would see he was an actor. He told me about his prop years later. He came over, introduced himself. I found out he recently moved to LA from Ohio to pursue a career, and he was already on the sitcom A New Kind of Family. I admitted having seen his picture in the teen magazine. After a quick chat, I left with the impression that he was cute. Actually, he was almost pretty, sweet and funny. Just the kind of guy I could go for if he called me, which he didn't. I wasn't ready to answer that kind of phone call anyway. I was still living in the midst of my dorkdom. However, with plenty of other business-related calls coming in, my mother, in a stroke of well-timed brilliance, which came naturally to her, decided to hire a manager to help build my career outside of Little House. She introduced me to Ray Katz, a very large, very round man with an equally large of face in a high rise on Sunset Boulevard. He helped the Osmonds establish their empire, managed Cher, Dolly Parton, and KC. Oh, KC and the Sunshine Band. And seemed at one time or another to have repped every one of consequences in the pop universe. I'm sure the meaning was a fate of a comply between my mother and Ray, with the only outstanding condition being my approval, which seemed a foregone conclusion when my mother introduced him to me as Uncle Ray. And why shouldn't it have been a done deal? He had ridiculously successful clients. I remember sitting in his office quietly listening to my mother and Ray talk about the fortunate position I was in, namely a key ingredient on a hit TV series embraced by mainstream America as one of its favorite teenage sweethearts. As both agreed, there had to be a way to parlay it into something more. I'd like her to show people her versatility as an actor, my mother said. Granted, it was my mother talking, but that was the first time I heard anyone talk about my versatility as an actor. Ray, of course, agreed. If you could handpick your dream roles for Melissa, he began, what will they be? My mother rattled off Helen Keller, Anne Frank, and Joan of Arc. She said she'd love to see me in a remake of the Song of Bernadette, and that was how my movie career started. It was 1978, and I was about to turn 14. Suddenly, my mom and I were starring a production company. I I think they might have meant to put starting. Yeah, right? Isn't that funny? I think they meant to put starting. It says starring. Starring a production company. Half Pint Productions. And Ray set about producing The Miracle Worker for me. I watched the 1962 original starring Patty Duke as Helen Keller, as Helen, and Anne Bancroft as her indefatigable teacher, Annie Sullivan. I wanted to know what my mom and Uncle Ray were getting me into, and I was blown away after watching performances that can earn both Actress Academy Awards. I remember thinking, what if I can't do this? I didn't tell anyone, but the challenge of playing Helen scared me. It was beyond anything I'd done up till then. By the way, she did a remarkable job. I couldn't envision where or how to begin. But there's this person in me who appears when my back is against the wall. She's part show-off, part wonderful Wonder Woman, and part too dumb to know any better, she says. You don't think so? Well, watch this. And then she dives in. Oh, by the way, Paula, I'm sorry I did not notice you coming in when you first came in. And that's when what I did. Then I was told that Patty Duke Aston, as she was known at the time, her real name is Anna. Really? Was going to play Annie Sullivan, which was both thrilling and intimidating. Our first meeting was a key moment in my life. It was in Ray's office, and it was the first time I sat down with someone who knew exactly what I was going through in my life. It was as if she could see into my brain. She'd been on, no, she'd been one of the most successful child actors ever, the youngest to win an Oscar, and the star of her own TV show. Behind her stardom, though, was a lifetime filled with abuse, drug problems, screwed up relationships, and she courageously revealed it in her 1987 memoir, Call Me Anna. A triumph coming to terms with bipolar disorder and ultimately allowed her to reclaim her real name and identity, which had been taken from her at age 7 when hold on. Tyrannical managers stripped her of nearly all that was familiar, beginning with her name. Though my life wasn't anywhere near as troubled, at the very least, she knew what it was like to be a porcelain doll. When I looked into her eyes, we had an instant connection beyond the normal exchange of fellow despians. Meeting each other for the first time, I just knew she got me. Then she taught me how to sign the alphabet. I left thinking she was going to be great. She was more than great, and to this day remains one of my dearest friends and mentors. Hi, Arnie, how are you? You might have a delay, Paula, because you just sit. Not only was the miracle work of my first project as a producer, as well as my first test as an actor, it was also my first play. In a stroke of genius, which may have been Uncle Ray's doing, it was decided the best thing for us as a cast in production in general would be to stage it as a play before we got the movie. We'll get all the kinks out of the performances, all the news and announces down, and then all we had to do is move to the soundstage and shoot it. Oh, there you go, Arnie. It's a good book. Did you watch the other videos, Arnie, with me reading it? Today I'm doing 3 chapters because there were several people in here. Once the Little House season wrapped, Ray booked the production at the Royal Point Sienna Playhouse in Palm Beach, Florida, and we began rehearsals at Los Angeles. Despite our many conversations Anna had unbeknownst to me, been told not to coach or talk to me about playing Helen. It was extremely difficult for her because she realized I was skating across the surface of the part. The problem was I didn't know any better. I thought I could take on the role the same way I had for 4 years on Little House. In my one movie, The Christmas Coal Mines Miracle, which was essentially me being me. In reality, there wasn't much of a difference between Laura and Melissa. I didn't have to stretch to imagine myself as her, but playing Helen Keller was an entirely different situation. She did 74. Well, I'm about to be on 78. I'm on 74 right now. But Arnie, you can get caught up by it's a playlist on my channel. Oh no. My iPad wasn't on. I mean, wasn't plugged in. Are you on 72? 74? All the way on the bottom. The very last paragraph. I'll wait till I hear from you. The heck was that noise? See, this is the last 2. I know the next thing what that's about. Oh, I can't wait to see that. Okay. Arnie, did you get to 74? All right, it said the last paragraph. Then we're going on to 78. I mean 75. Okay. See right down here. It starts off at the core. At the core, I think all 3 of us, Laura, Helen Keller, and myself, she had a certain kind of tendency, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into by playing this remarkable girl. Actors talk about their process of building a character, of climbing into a person's life, inha- inhabiting him or her from head to toe. And I didn't have any of those skills. Nothing that could have been described as a process. With 3 weeks to go before we left for Florida, Ray and the director Paul Aaron met with my mother and told her that I wasn't delivering at the level they needed. In fact, they put it more bluntly than that. They said that while the cast, which included Diana Muldaur, and Charles Gilbert, had gelled as they expected from seasoned pros, it was obvious that I simply didn't have it. Uh, yes, she did. She played a phenomenal part. That's one of my favorite movies of her. My, my mother, the source of my tenaciousness, whisked me to her former acting coach, Jeff Corey. After being blacklisted for refusing to name names before the House on American Activities commentary in the 50s, Jeff, a Shakespeare trained actor with dozens of films and TV credits, turned to teaching and counted James Dean, James Fonda, and Jack Nicholson among his many students. He was an older, earthly type of hippie guy who lived and worked in Malibu. I adored him, and yet from the moment we met, he scared the crap out of me. I had a sore throat the first day my mother took me to his place, and Jeff made me drink milk with acidophilus in it. We went into his house and he talked to me about the role. He asked my ideas and thought. Then he said, "We're going to do something, and it's going to be scary. How are you with that?" "Okay, I guess," I said. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll make it through. I think it's going to help you." He then blindfolded me. Oh, yeah. He then blindfolded me, turned off the lights, and tossed me around the room for about 45 minutes. He let me trip over furniture, and when I couldn't figure out where I was, he called to me from across the room, let me stumble over furniture, fall, and cry through my frustrations until I found my way into his arms. He was Annie to my Helen. What? He also suggested I blindfold myself at home, have someone spin me around, and try to find my way around the house, which I did. I bet her brother will be more than happy to do that. Despite the black and blue marks, I stepped deeper into Helen than I imagined I could. As he promised, Jeff helped give me a process that let me develop a layered performance. Some of the critics even mentioned the tentative way I walked and moved, very much afraid to leave where I'd just been because I wasn't sure where I was going. There was also a quiet moment on the plane to Florida, when Anna tapped me on the head and said, "Listen, would you like to talk about Helen Keller?" Grateful and eager, I spun around in my seat and got some vital information from her, including help with the one line of dialogue I had to deliver. It was actually a single word. Water. That was the one word Helen knew before she went blind and deaf as a child. I was having trouble saying it correctly. I knew it was something she hadn't said for a long time, and it was also the crucial moment when she made the connection between the sign for water and water itself. Had to show the light bulb of recognition going off in her head and also articulate the word much less clearly than normal, but no less understandably. No matter how I tried, I didn't sound like the voice of a person who hadn't spoken since she was a toddler, speaking her first word. I confessed as much to Anna on the plane, and she understood exactly my frustrations. She struggled with the same thing 17 years earlier. Do you want to know the trick? She asked. Please tell me, I said. She grinned. Say it like you're sitting on the toilet and you're really constipated. She said, really? She nodded, and lo and behold, that most basic and embarrassing tip, along with the rest of her advice, unlocked a door to an actor's dream. Each night during the play, I entered from the back of the stage and ran straight to front, averting catastrophic by stopping just at the edge, and from opening night through the run, which was extended, the people in the front row stood to catch me, at which point I knew I had them. They really thought I was blind and deaf. I felt like a conqueror. My eyes opened to the possibility that this thing I was doing as a hobby was something I could actually learn about to develop into a serious craft. My eyes also opened to another reality about my life as an actor. On the flight to Florida, my darling sister Sarah, who continued to be the most remarkable child, was absolutely wild. My whole family, including my grandmother, had come on the trip, and my mother, concerned about Sarah's comfort on the plane, had given her a spoonful of Benadryl to make her a little sleepy. Instead, it had the opposite effect, and she ran up and down the aisles, this beautiful 3-year-old Botticelli child climbing under people's feet, taking their food and yelling, kill, kill, kill. What? Really? Little Sarah Gilbert said that? As everyone tried to rein her in, my turn to wrangle her came at the airport after we landed. I wasn't big, Sarah was already half my size. As I tried to hold her in my arms with our backs arching and my head dodging her flailing hands, a woman came up to me and asked if I was Melissa Gilbert. Well, it didn't knock Sarah out. Yes, I am, I said above Sarah's screaming. Oh gosh, my daughter loves you, she said. Can I get your autograph? I struggled to hold my sister, who was trying to wiggle out of my grasp. I'm sorry, I can't right now, I said, winced. Oh, what a little brat you are, she hissed, her sweet, friendly tone evaporating faster than a drop of water in the Mojave. She walked away. Wait, whoa. She called Melissa a brat? She's a brat. She walked away, leaving me shattered by this, my first unprotected brush with my own celebrity. Later, I realized while everyone else in the airport had been able to behave in whatever way they felt like at the moment, including that woman who was insensitive or just oblivious and downright mean. I had to be perfect, smiley, kind, and polite, or else I was a little brat. That's a hell of a message to give someone who already stuffed her feelings away. And this is the last page, guys. This is page 78. It wasn't fair, and I was bothered by that conqueror of for weeks. No one had ever told me how to handle such situations. And to be honest, although I was around famous people every day, I didn't have any understanding or awareness of celebrity, including my own. One day in Los Angeles, I was in the car with my mother when I asked her what it was like to be famous. She looked at me like I was out of my head. What do you mean? She asked. What is it to be famous? I said again. Well, you're famous, she replied, kind of bewildered but trying to be matter of fact. No, I said, I meant like a famous person. Like who? She said. Like Farrah Fawcett. You are, she says. I shook my head. No, Mom, you don't understand. I'm talking about. She put her hands up, signaling me to stop. No, Melissa, you don't understand, she said. And you know what? She was right. I didn't understand. But I'll find out soon enough. And that's all I'm going to be reading today. I think like 3 chapters is enough. I have to update my title. So tomorrow we'll do 8. Possibly 9 and 10 as well. My eyes was getting dry and hurting. So that's why I'm stopping. If they weren't dry and hurting, I probably will go on and on. Oh, you're welcome. I love this book. I know some people will leave and don't want to hear about the famous actors and what they did in the past. It's okay. This is for the people who want to hear everything. Some people don't want to stay because they don't want to hear bad things. Hey, don't stay then. But I'm glad you guys stayed. And Arnie, I'm glad you're following along. And I have to go because it's supper time. See what my brother wants to do for supper. Oh, we're having macaroni salad. Or I can do hamburgers with it. So, plus we have tomatoes and lettuce to go on those hamburgers. So I love you guys. We'll do this. I don't know if this is going to be early in the day or later in the day. See you later, Paula. All right, but hey, it's a good bedtime story for you. So love, don't judge. Peace out.